The gym smelled faintly of crayons, glue sticks, and the faint syrupy sweetness of juice boxes left behind from lunch. Rows of folding chairs squeaked as second graders wiggled in their seats, waiting for the next grown-up to step onto the little stage. They had already heard from a grocery clerk, a bus driver, and a nurse. The teacher clapped her hands and called, "All right, class, let's welcome Mr. Evan, our neighbourhood firefighter." He wasn't the kind of man who enjoyed attention. His boots thudded softly as he walked forward, shoulders squared but face tight, as though he'd rather run into smoke than stand in front of 30 wide-eyed children. His turnout coat hung over one arm. In his other hand, he carried a plastic helmet he had grabbed last minute from the firehouse play corner, thinking maybe it would make the kids smile. He cleared his throat. "Being a firefighter means we try to keep people safe. We answer calls when there's a fire or an accident." His voice came out steady but cautious. Most of the children leaned forward with excitement. They peppered him with questions about climbing ladders, about dogs named Spot, about sirens and flashing lights. He answered each politely, careful not to promise more than he could. Then a smaller voice rose above the chatter. Maya Matthews, 7 years old with hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, sat near the front. She had drawn on her notebook through most of the morning, sketching little houses and stick figures. Now her hand was in the air. When he nodded, she asked, simple and direct, "Do you ever get scared?" The room quieted at once. Even the teacher tilted her head, curious. Evan's throat tightened. He had prepared answers about bravery, about teamwork, about the weight of heavy gear. He had not prepared for this. His mind flashed with the memory of smoke so thick it had swallowed his partner's voice, of the night he had stood helpless outside a house he could not enter fast enough. He shifted his boots on the wooden floor. "Yes," he said finally, the word bare and unvarnished. "I get scared a lot." A ripple of surprise passed through the children. A boy whispered, "Firefighters can't be scared." Evan heard it but didn't correct him with a lecture. He looked at Maya, at her serious eyes waiting for more. "Being brave," he added quietly, "is not about never being afraid. It's about still going forward, even when your heart is pounding." For a moment the gym was utterly silent. Then Maya stood. She crossed the short distance between her chair and where he stood, ignoring the teacher's raised eyebrows. Without asking, she wrapped her arms around his leg in a quick, certain hug. "You're still brave," she said, "because you told the truth." Something inside him wavered. He had walked into fires without blinking. But this small gesture from a child who barely knew him, hit deeper than he expected. He bent down to her level, carefully resting one hand on her shoulder. "What's your name?" he asked. "Maya," she replied proudly. "My mum says I should always ask questions, even if they sound silly." He smiled, a real one this time, the first in a long while. The other children giggled, the tension in the room melting. The teacher clapped politely, moving the program along, but Evan stayed crouched a moment longer. He studied the drawing Maya had left on her open notebook, a fire truck with smoke above it, and a figure standing tall with a helmet, surrounded by stars. He did not know why, but the stars caught his breath. When the bell rang and the students spilled into the hallway, Maya skipped toward the door, her sketchbook hugged close. She looked back once, lifted her small hand and waved. Evan lifted his in return, his heart unexpectedly lighter. He had walked into that gym expecting to get through the morning, answer a few routine questions, and go back to the firehouse. Instead, a child's simple question and her fearless hug had cracked open something he thought was gone. And as the echoes of sneakers faded down the hallway, he realised that the hardest walls to break were not made of brick or steel, but of silence carried inside a man for too long. The city bus rattled over a pothole, jolting Lena awake. Her head had slumped against the window, leaving a faint, foggy circle on the glass. The driver glanced at her in the mirror, his voice kind but firm. "End of the line, ma'am, time to wake up." Lena blinked, startled, and gathered her bag from the floor. Maya sat beside her, swinging her legs, a half-finished drawing balanced on her knees. She looked up with concern. "Mum, you fell asleep again." "I'm fine," Lena murmured, forcing a smile. "Just a long morning." But the truth clung to her bones. She had been on her feet since before dawn at the bakery, rolling dough until her arms ached. In a few hours, she would head to her evening shift at the library, shelving books until the building closed. 2 jobs, back to back, and still the bills waited in silent stacks. They stepped off the bus into the cool air, the grocery bag digging into Lena's shoulder. Their apartment complex stood tired against the grey sky, paint peeling and stair railings rusted. Kids raced up the concrete steps, their laughter sharp against Lena's fatigue. At the door, Lena fumbled with the keys while Maya pressed her face against the mail slot. "There's a letter on the floor, Mum." Lena's stomach sank. She scooped it up quickly, noting the red stamp across the envelope. Her pulse quickened, but she stuffed it into her bag before Maya could ask more. "Inside, sweetheart. Wash your hands before dinner." The apartment smelled faintly of cinnamon, scents from her bakery uniform that never quite washed out. Maya spread her crayons across the kitchen table, humming as she sketched a fire truck with oversized wheels. Lena set groceries on the counter, her eyes drifting to the unopened envelopes stacked by the sink. The weight of them pressed harder than the bag of flour in her arms that morning. She turned to the skillet, heating butter for grilled cheese. The hiss filled the silence. Maya glanced up, waving her drawing. "Look, Mum, it's Mr. Brave. I gave him stars because he's strong, even when he's scared." Lena's chest tightened. She brushed a curl from her daughter's forehead, whispering, "Maybe he's brave because he tells the truth." Maya smiled, satisfied with her answer, then bent back over her paper. Later that night, after dishes were stacked in the sink and Maya curled under her blanket, Lena sat by the window with the letter in her lap. The radiator hissed beside her, a tired sound she had learned to live with. She tore the envelope open and read the words she dreaded. Past due balance, final warning. Her throat burned. She folded the letter neatly, as if order could make it less crushing, and slipped it back into her bag. From the bedroom came Maya's sleepy voice, drifting like a promise. "You always figure it out, Mum." Lena pressed her hand against her eyes. She wanted to believe it. She wanted her daughter's faith to be enough. But the truth weighed heavy, and in the quiet of that apartment, she whispered to herself the same vow she had made every night. One more day, one more shift, keep going. Somewhere across town, in a firehouse garage that smelled faintly of smoke and steel, Evan lay awake too, thinking of the little girl who had asked him about fear, and wondering why her words had stayed with him long after the school bell had rung. The late afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the worn grass of the community soccer field. Parents clustered along the sidelines, chatting about homework, weekend chores, and what to cook for dinner. The smell of cut grass mingled with the faint hint of hot dogs from a nearby food truck. Maya ran with a group of kids, her sneakers thudding against the patchy turf. Her ponytail bounced as she laughed, her cheeks glowing pink from the cool breeze. For a moment, Lena allowed herself to relax. She sat on the bleachers, clutching a thermos of coffee to fight off her fatigue, and watched her daughter move with the carefree joy she wished she could bottle. But as the game wore on, Maya began to slow. Her laughter quieted, replaced by short, shallow breaths. She tugged at the neckline of her jersey, as if trying to let in more air. At first, Lena thought it was just the running. Then Maya stopped altogether, doubled over with her small hands pressed to her knees. "Mom!" The word barely carried across the field. Panic surged through Lena. She scrambled down the bleachers, her thermos tumbling to the ground. "Maya!" By the time she reached her, Maya's face had gone pale, her lips tinged blue. She wheezed, clutching her chest, eyes wide with fear. Lena's own hands trembled as she fumbled for the inhaler in her purse, her heart thundering louder than the noise of the game around them. "Breathe, baby, just breathe," she pleaded, but her own voice cracked with terror. Out of the corner of her eye, a figure moved fast across the field. Evan, still in his workout clothes from a run around the track, dropped to his knees beside them. His calm presence cut through the chaos. "What's her name?" he asked quickly. "Maya," Lena gasped. "Asthma, please, it's bad." Evan's voice dropped to a steady, low tone, the kind used by someone who had faced emergencies before. "Maya, I'm Evan. Look at me." He tilted her chin gently, locking eyes with her. "You're okay. We're going to help you breathe." He guided Lena's shaking hands as she pressed the inhaler against her daughter's lips. One puff, hold it in. That's it. Now again, slow, steady. Maya's chest heaved, her small body trembling. Tears blurred Lena's vision. She had handled so much alone, double shifts, bills, everything. But in that moment, she felt helpless, powerless against her daughter's gasping breaths. "Stay with me, sunshine," Evan murmured, his tone a mix of command and comfort. "Count with me. 1, 2, 3. The seconds stretched like hours. Slowly, Maya's breaths deepened. The wheeze softened. She leaned against her mother, eyelids heavy but no longer frantic. Relief hit Lena so hard her knees nearly buckled. Evan nodded firmly. "She needs to be checked. There's an urgent care a mile away. I'll drive. No arguments." Lena wanted to protest, to insist she could handle it, but one glance at Maya's fragile form silenced her pride. She let him scoop the girl into his arms, steady and protective, as though she weighed nothing at all. In the parking lot, he opened the door of his beat-up pickup, laying Maya gently across the seat. Lena slid in beside her, stroking her hair, whispering, "You're okay, baby, you're okay." The ride was quiet except for Maya's soft breathing. Evan's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his jaw tight. He didn't speak until they pulled into the urgent care lot, where the glowing red letters hummed against the evening sky. Inside, nurses hurried to them, guiding Maya into a room for a quick exam. Lena sank into a plastic chair, her hands pressed together in silent prayer. When Evan returned from filling out the intake form, he crouched beside her. "She'll be all right," he said gently. "You got to her fast. That matters." Lena shook her head, tears streaking her cheeks. I couldn't think straight." "You don't have to do it all alone," he replied. His eyes were steady, almost stubborn, like someone who had decided this truth wasn't up for debate. When the doctor finally emerged and confirmed Maya was stable, just an exacerbation, no hospitalization needed, Lena exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She clutched her daughter's hand, grateful and shaken. As they stepped back into the cool night air, Evan walked beside them, his silence saying more than words could. For the first time, Lena didn't feel like she was carrying the weight of the world alone. And for Evan, the memory of a child's fearless hug at career day no longer felt like an isolated spark. It was growing into something larger, something he hadn't dared hope for in years. The smell of fresh bread drifted from the small corner bakery long after the sun had set. The display case was nearly empty, just a few bagels left behind and a lone cinnamon roll that had grown stale during the day. Lena wiped down the counter with slow, tired motions, her shoulders aching from the weight of 2 jobs, and the scare at the soccer field still pulsing faintly in her chest. The bell above the door jingled, startling her. She turned to see Evan step inside, his hair damp from a quick shower at the firehouse, his sweatshirt creased from being thrown on in a rush. He looked slightly out of place in the quiet shop, but his voice was warm. "I thought the crew could use something sweet," he said. "Heard you might have leftovers." Lena reached for a paper bag, filling it with the last loaves of bread. "You're lucky. Usually by now everything's gone." She hesitated, then added softly, "Thank you, for earlier. I don't know what I would have done without you." Evan shook his head. "You did everything right. You had the inhaler. You stayed calm enough to use it." She let out a tired laugh. "I didn't feel calm." "Most parents don't," he said gently. "But she trusts you. That's half the battle." The door creaked again and Maya appeared, her cheeks flushed with the glow of evening. She carried a scrap of paper she had been colouring in the back. "Look, Mum! Look, Mr. Brave!" she exclaimed, holding it out proudly. The drawing showed a stick figure in oversized boots and a red helmet, standing tall in front of a fire. A cape stretched behind him, fluttering against a sky filled with stars. Next to him was a smaller figure with curly hair and a pink dress. The two were holding hands. Evan blinked at the picture, his lips parting as if words had failed him. For a man used to sirens and alarms, he suddenly looked unsteady in the silence of a bakery after hours. He crouched down to her level, studying the crayon lines. "You gave me a cape," he said with a faint smile. Maya nodded seriously. "Superheroes get scared too, but they keep helping people anyway." Her simple certainty knocked the breath out of him. He had spent years burying fear beneath long shifts, buried grief behind walls of silence. And here was this small girl who had nearly collapsed in his arms hours earlier, declaring him something more than the broken man he saw in the mirror. Lena cleared her throat, her voice softer than usual. She draws what she believes. I guess tonight she believes in you. Evan swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. Instead, he reached for the paper bag of bread, his fingers brushing hers for just a second. The touch was brief, but enough to send a flicker of awareness through both of them. "Thank you," he said, lifting the bag, for letting me be there today." As he turned to leave, Maya darted forward and slipped her drawing into the bag. "For the crew," she said. "So they remember you're superheroes too." Evan paused at the door, his back to them, shoulders rising and falling with a breath that seemed heavier than it should have been. When he finally glanced over his shoulder, his expression carried something Lena hadn't seen before. Not just gratitude, but the fragile beginnings of hope. The bell jingled again as he stepped out into the night, carrying bread, a crayon drawing, and a weight in his chest that felt just a little lighter. Lena stood behind the counter, watching the door swing closed. She brushed a strand of hair from her face and whispered, almost to herself, "Maybe superheroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they just show up." Maya giggled, not understanding the heaviness of her mother's tone, and skipped back to her crayons. But Lena felt it deep in her bones, the quiet sense that something was shifting, that the man her daughter had called Mr. Brave was not just passing through their lives. And as the street outside fell into darkness, she let herself wonder, for the first time in years, what it might mean if he stayed. The morning air was cool and damp, carrying the smell of rain-soaked pavement. Lena balanced a grocery bag against her hip as she and Maya climbed the narrow stairs to their apartment. Maya skipped ahead, humming to herself, her backpack bouncing with every step. "Race you to the door, Mum," she shouted, her laughter echoing in the stairwell. Lena smiled despite her exhaustion. She adjusted the bag and quickened her pace, pretending to chase. But when Maya reached their door, her laughter stopped. She stood frozen, staring at the piece of paper taped across the chipped wood. The bright red letters screamed louder than any siren. "Notice to vacate." Maya's voice was small. "Mum, are we moving?" The grocery bag nearly slipped from Lena's hands. Her throat tightened, but she forced her face into calm she didn't feel. "It's just a letter, honey. Don't worry about it." She peeled the paper from the door and crumpled it quickly, hiding it behind her back before guiding Maya inside. The apartment felt smaller than ever, the silence heavy. Lena set the groceries down and ducked into the kitchen, her hands shaking as she smoothed the wrinkled paper against the counter. Her eyes ran over the words she had been dreading: past due rent, 3 days to pay, or leave. She pressed her palms flat against the countertop, her breath shallow. She had stretched every paycheck, taken on every extra hour the bakery and library offered, and still it wasn't enough. From the living room came the sound of crayons scratching across paper. Maya's voice floated in, bright and unbothered. "I'm drawing pancakes. We should have pancakes tonight, Mum." The innocence cut deep. Lena swiped at her eyes quickly and forced herself back into the room, plastering on a smile. "That sounds perfect," she said, kissing the top of her daughter's head. Later that evening, as twilight painted the windows orange, a knock echoed at the door. Lena's stomach dropped. She braced herself, half expecting the landlord, but when she opened the door, it was Evan, holding a plastic container. "Leftovers," he explained. "The guys at the station made too much chili." He stopped, noticing the faint tear stains on her cheeks and the way she quickly shoved a folded paper beneath a stack of mail. "Everything okay?" he asked. Lena nodded too quickly. "Long day." Maya burst in, waving her drawing. "Look, Mr. Brave, pancakes." Evan crouched, studying the picture, then glanced up. His eyes caught the edge of the notice sticking out from the pile of mail. He didn't say anything right away, but the silence between them spoke louder than words. "Lena," he said softly, "you don't have to hide it." Her shoulders stiffened. Pride had been her armour for years, and admitting weakness felt unbearable. But the truth pressed heavy, and for the first time she let out a trembling breath. "They want us out. 3 days." Evan set the container on the counter and leaned on the doorway, his expression steady but serious. "We'll figure it out." "There's no we," she whispered. "It's my problem." He shook his head. "Not anymore." Before she could argue, Maya tugged at his sleeve. "Can you come to our pancake dinner?" she asked. Evan smiled faintly. Wouldn't miss it. As Lena flipped pancakes that night, the eviction notice lay hidden under the stack of mail, but its weight lingered in every corner of the apartment. She caught Evan watching her quietly as Maya chatted about sprinkles and syrup. For the first time in a long time, Lena didn't feel entirely alone in the storm. And though she didn't say it out loud, a small, fragile hope flickered. Maybe "we" wasn't such a dangerous word after all. The firehouse smelled like butter and syrup, the kind of smell that clung to clothes and hair long after you left. Folding tables stretched the length of the garage, covered in paper tablecloths and stacks of paper plates. String lights twinkled above the shiny red engine, making the place feel less like a station and more like the heart of the neighbourhood. $5 a plate, all you can eat, one firefighter called, flipping a pancake high into the air. The crowd cheered as the griddle hissed. Children giggled while parents lined up, swapping stories about school and work. Lena slipped in quietly, carrying a tray of muffins from the bakery. She felt out of place, but Maya darted ahead with her crayon poster clutched to her chest. "Look what I made!" Maya shouted to anyone who would listen. The poster showed a stack of pancakes shaped like a fire truck, syrup dripping down the sides. When one of the firefighters held it up, the whole crowd clapped, and Maya's face lit with pride. Lena's throat tightened at the sight. For once, her daughter wasn't worrying about inhalers or late-night phone calls. She was just a kid, beaming under string lights in a room full of cheer. Across the garage, Evan worked the griddle, sleeves rolled up, flipping pancakes with practiced ease. He looked every bit the steady firefighter, but his eyes kept drifting to Maya's laughter, softening each time. Later, when the line thinned and people began stacking chairs, Evan found Lena standing near the back door, her empty muffin tray in hand. He nodded toward the parking lot. "Need some air?" She followed him outside. The night was cool, the hum of voices muffled behind them. A streetlight buzzed faintly overhead, casting a circle of light on the cracked pavement. For a moment they stood in silence, watching neighbours drift toward their cars. Finally, Evan spoke. His voice was quieter than she'd ever heard it. "These events, they aren't just about pancakes. They're about the kids. About making sure no one slips through the cracks." He hesitated, his jaw tightening. "A long time ago, there was a call I can't forget. A little boy. Smoke so thick we couldn't find him in time. His mother screamed his name until her voice broke. He drew in a steadying breath, staring at the ground. That night has never left me. Whenever I see a child struggling to breathe, it feels like I'm back there, fighting against smoke I can't push through." Lena's heart clenched. She wanted to reach for his hand, but instead she just whispered, "I'm sorry." He shook his head. "Don't be. It's why I show up for things like this. Why I couldn't walk away the other night. I don't want anyone else to carry that kind of loss if I can help it." The weight of his words settled between them, not heavy, but real. Lena looked at him differently now, not just as the firefighter who had saved her daughter, but as a man still carrying his own ghosts. Inside, the crowd cheered again as someone announced the fundraiser total. Maya's laugh rose above the noise, pure and bright. Evan glanced toward the door, then back at Lena. "Your daughter, she has a way of making it lighter, even for me." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The night air carried the smell of syrup and smoke, and Lena felt a shift she couldn't quite name. When they stepped back inside, Maya raced over, clutching a paper plate stacked with pancakes. She offered it proudly. "Try mine, Mr. Brave, I put sprinkles on top." Evan crouched, took a bite, and gave a dramatic thumbs up. Maya squealed, delighted. And for the first time in a long time, Lena laughed. Not the tired kind, but a laugh that felt real, bubbling up from somewhere she thought she had lost. The next Saturday morning dawned grey and heavy with clouds. Lena had just finished her shift at the bakery and walked home with flour still dusting the cuffs of her sleeves. She pushed open the apartment door to find Maya curled on the couch, crayons scattered across the coffee table. But she wasn't alone. A woman sat beside her, hands folded neatly in her lap, posture straight as a ruler. Her dark hair was streaked with grey, pulled into a bun that hadn't loosened in years. "Aunt Carol," Lena whispered, surprise catching in her throat. Carol rose, smoothing her blouse. I called ahead, but you didn't answer. I thought I'd stop by. She glanced around the apartment, her eyes resting on the peeling paint near the window, the stack of unopened mail, and the tired look in Lena's face. Maya scrambled up and ran to hug her. Aunt Carol! Look! I drew a fire truck! She held up the paper proudly, the red crayon smudged across her fingers. Carol smiled at her, genuine warmth breaking through her otherwise stern features. That's beautiful, sweetheart. When Maya disappeared into her room to find another drawing, the air shifted. Carol's voice lowered. Lena, she was asleep on a bakery chair when I came in this morning. Alone. Customers were walking past, and your daughter was curled up under her jacket like it was normal. Lena's stomach dropped. She rubbed her hands over her face. The sitter cancelled last minute. I couldn't afford to miss another shift. Carol's expression softened, but her words held weight. I know you're doing your best. I see how hard you work, but this isn't sustainable. You're burning yourself out and she's paying the price. The words stung because they were true. Lena turned to the window, blinking against the prickle of tears. What do you want me to do, Carol? Quit? Stop paying rent? Hope the bills disappear? Carol hesitated, then spoke carefully. I'm not your enemy, but if things keep going like this, I worry the state might step in. And if that happens, you won't get a choice. Lena spun around, her voice sharp with fear. Don't you dare say that! Carol's face softened again, regret flickering in her eyes. I'm saying it because I care. If you ever need me to take Maya for a while, just until you find your footing, I will. Not because you're failing, Lena, but because she deserves to feel safe. The door creaked open, and Maya padded back in, clutching a stuffed bear and another drawing. She looked up at the two women, sensing the tension. Did I do something wrong? Lena's heart broke. She crouched quickly, pulling her daughter close. No, baby, not at all. Avon's knock came at that moment, carrying the smell of smoke and coffee from the firehouse. When Lena opened the door, relief flickered in her eyes. He stepped inside, sensing the heaviness immediately. Carol studied him, taking in his steady presence and the way Maya lit up when he entered. You're the firefighter, she said. Evan nodded politely. Yes, Mom, Evan. Maya tugged his hand, chattering about her drawings. He followed, leaving Lena and Carol in the doorway. Carol leaned in, her voice quiet but firm. He seems good for her, for you. But you can't build your life around hope alone. You need a plan. Lena swallowed hard. I know. When Carol finally left, Maya waved from the window, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. Lena closed the door, leaning against it with a shaky breath. Evan stood nearby, holding Maya's newest drawing, this one of 3 stick figures, a woman, a girl, and a firefighter with a crooked smile. He lifted his eyes to Lena's, reading the worry etched across her face. Want to talk about it? He asked gently. Her voice cracked. Not yet. He nodded once, no pressure in his tone. Then we'll just be here. And as Maya hummed softly in the corner, the weight of her aunt's warning pressed down on Lena's heart. She had always been strong enough to carry her own burdens, but now she wondered if being strong meant learning when not to carry them alone. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the radiator and the faint tick of a clock on the wall. Lena sat curled on the couch with her knees pulled to her chest, staring at the unpaid bills spread across the table. The hospital discharge papers lay on top, reminding her of how close she'd come to losing Maya. She rubbed her temples, exhaustion blurring her vision. At last, she pushed the papers aside and tiptoed toward her daughter's room. Maya was sleeping peacefully, her curls spread across the pillow, her small chest rising and falling in an even rhythm. Relief washed over Lena. She kissed her forehead and whispered, "Stay strong, baby," before slipping back into the living room. But an hour later, the sound that haunted her heart returned, a rasping wheeze, sharp and desperate. Lena was on her feet instantly, rushing into the room. Maya sat upright in bed, eyes wide with panic, her hands clutching at her chest. "Mum!" Her voice was no louder than a squeak. Lena's hands shook as she grabbed the inhaler. "It's okay, sweetheart. Deep breath, just like we practiced." She pressed the medicine to her daughter's lips, but the relief didn't come fast enough. The wheeze deepened, and tears blurred Lena's eyes. She fumbled for her phone, dialing with trembling fingers. She had barely hit the call button when a knock thundered at the door. "Lena?" Evan's voice carried through the wood, urgent. "Are you awake?" She stumbled to the door and yanked it open. He stood there in his firehouse sweatshirt, hair damp from a late-night run. His chest heaved as if he had sprinted all the way. "I was jogging past and saw your light still on," he said quickly. "Something told me to check. What's happening?" "Her breathing," Lena gasped. "It's bad." He brushed past gently, heading straight for Maya's room. Dropping to one knee, he spoke in the same calm, steady voice that had carried her through the soccer field. "Hey, sunshine, look at me. We're going to slow it down together, all right?" He guided Maya's breaths, counting softly. 1, 2, steady now. You're not alone. But the wheeze didn't ease quickly enough. He looked at Lena, eyes sharp. "She needs the hospital. Grab her coat." Within minutes, Evan was carrying Maya in his arms, her head pressed against his chest, her small body trembling. Lena ran beside them, clutching the inhaler. The night air was cold as they climbed into his truck. The ride was tense and quiet, the city lights blurring past. Lena held Maya's hand, whispering encouragement, while Evan's jaw stayed tight, both hands steady on the wheel. "Stay with us, sunshine," he murmured, glancing back whenever he could. At the hospital, nurses moved fast, fitting Maya with an oxygen mask. The hiss of air filled the room, monitors beeping steadily. Lena's knees weakened. She sank into a chair, her hands pressed together, whispering silent prayers. Evan stood close, his hand on her shoulder. "She's in good hands now. You got her here in time." Tears slipped down Lena's cheeks. I froze again. What if..." He crouched in front of her, his eyes steady. "You didn't freeze. You fought. You grabbed the inhaler. You called for help. You're her anchor, Lena. Don't forget that." When the doctor finally assured them that Maya was stable and could go home, Lena nearly broke from relief. Evan carried the girl out into the dawn light, her little arms still looped around his neck, her breathing even at last. Walking beside him, Lena realised she wasn't just grateful for his help. She was grateful for his presence, for the way he showed up again and again, not because he had to, but because he chose to. And for the first time, she let herself believe he might keep choosing to stay. The morning after the hospital visit, Lena brewed coffee she could barely taste. The kitchen felt too quiet, its thin walls holding the echoes of the night before. Maya was still asleep on the couch, her chest rising and falling more peacefully now, her stuffed bear tucked under her chin. Lena stood at the sink, gripping the counter, staring out at the grey sky beyond the window. The eviction notice sat folded in a drawer. The weight of unpaid bills pressed harder than the steam rising from the mug in her hands. A soft knock came at the door. She opened it to find Evan, hair damp, boots still streaked with dirt from his shift. He held a grocery bag in one hand and a small pack of batteries in the other. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly, though relief flickered across her face. "Too late," he replied, stepping inside. "I brought breakfast and batteries." She frowned. "Batteries?" He set the bag on the counter, pulling out a box. "For your smoke alarms. I noticed last night one of them was chirping. Figured I'd fix it before it gave you trouble." Lena crossed her arms. "You don't have to do that. You don't have to do any of this." Evan didn't argue. He just pulled a chair under the hallway alarm, climbed up and replaced the battery. The faint beep confirmed the system was working again. He climbed down, wiping his hands on his jeans. There. One less thing to worry about. She shook her head, torn between frustration and gratitude. "Why are you doing this, Evan? You barely know us. You have your own life." He looked at her for a long moment, then spoke simply. "Because I remember what it feels like when nobody shows up. And I don't want you or Maya to feel that, you." Her defences trembled. She wanted to push him away, to tell him she didn't need saving. But the truth was different. She didn't want someone to swoop in and solve everything. She wanted someone who wouldn't leave when things got hard. "People say things like that," she whispered, "and then they walk away." Instead of answering, Evan crouched near the couch, gently brushing a curl from Maya's forehead. She stirred, opening her eyes with a sleepy smile. "Mr. Brave," she murmured. "Hey, sunshine," he said softly. "Feeling better?" She nodded, clutching her bear. "Mom makes the best pancakes when I'm sick. You should stay." Lena's breath caught. Evan glanced back at her, not with triumph, but with quiet steadiness. "If it's all right," he said, "I'd like to." The words weren't grand or dramatic, they were ordinary, but that was what made them powerful. Later, while Lena flipped pancakes on the stove, Evan fixed the loose hinge on the cabinet door without being asked. He wrote down his number on a sticky note in case Maya needed help when Lena was at work. He left the groceries neatly stacked on the counter. No speeches, no promises, just presents. And as Lena watched him carry his empty coffee mug to the sink, she realised something she hadn't allowed herself to believe in years. Maybe staying wasn't about what someone said, it was about what they quietly chose to do, day after day. The last days of summer stretched golden and slow. On Lena's street, neighbours strung lights between porches and dragged long folding tables into the centre of the block. The annual end-of-summer party was nothing fancy, just burgers sizzling on grills, kids racing down the sidewalk with chalk-stained hands, and old songs humming from a portable speaker. But for a few hours, the street felt like family. Lena stood at her apartment window, watching people gather. She hesitated, twisting her hands in her apron. For years, she had slipped quietly past these events, too busy or too tired to join. But this year, Maya tugged at her arm, eyes shining. "Come on, Mum. Everyone's waiting." When they stepped outside, the air smelled of charcoal and fresh-cut grass. Children darted around with paper plates piled high, while parents laughed over lawn chairs. Evan was already there, helping string the last set of lights. He looked up, and when his eyes found hers, something in his expression softened. He gave a small wave, nothing showy, but enough to send warmth curling in her chest. Maya ran ahead, holding a drawing she had worked on all week. It showed 3 stick figures, one with a fire helmet, one with long hair pulled back in a bun, and one in a bright pink dress. Above them, in bold crayon letters, she had written, "Mr. Brave, Mummy, and me." She thrust the paper into Evan's hands. "It's us," she declared. Evan's breath caught. For a man used to carrying ladders and dragging hoses, a simple piece of paper suddenly felt heavier than anything he had ever held. He crouched down, his eyes level with hers. "You think I belong in this picture?" Maya nodded fiercely. "You already do." And before he could respond, she wrapped her arms around his neck in a hug, not the curious, tentative hug from career day. This one was firm, certain, the kind that says, "You're part of my world now." Lena's throat tightened as she watched. The image would stay with her forever. Her daughter holding on to the man who had shown up again and again, not with promises, but with presence. Evan stood slowly, the crayon drawing still in his hand, the string lights glowing behind him. He looked at Lena, his voice low but steady. "You've both given me more than I can ever explain, and I don't plan on going anywhere." The words weren't dramatic, they were simple, ordinary, but they landed with a weight Lena couldn't ignore. Later, as the block party buzzed around them, Lena and Evan sat side by side at the long table while Maya twirled in the glow of the lights, chasing bubbles with the other kids. Neighbours laughed nearby, music drifted through the warm night, and for the first time in years, Lena felt the ache in her chest ease. It wasn't a fairy tale. The eviction notice still sat unresolved, bills still waited, and life would not magically soften overnight. But as she watched Evan lean down to show Maya how to balance her paper plate without spilling syrup, Lena realised something she had long forgotten. Security wasn't always about having every problem solved. It was about knowing someone would face them with you. And when Maya darted back to the table, pancake syrup smeared across her cheeks, she leaned against Evan's shoulder, giggling. "Now you're really Mr. Brave." Evan laughed softly, his arm instinctively circling her small frame. Lena's eyes met his across the table, and in that unspoken moment, she knew. The story that had begun with one hug in a school gym had come full circle. This time he wasn't just passing through, he was staying. Stories like this remind us that being brave isn't about fixing every problem overnight. It's about showing up, day after day, even when life feels heavy. Sometimes the smallest gestures, an extra shift worked, a drawing made with crayons, or the simple act of staying, can change the shape of a family's future. So here's a question for you. Who in your life needs to know you're not going anywhere? Who needs to feel that you'll stay, not just in the easy moments, but in the hard ones too? Thank you for watching and for sharing this time with us. We'll see you again tomorrow, right here on Rain Inside.